30 years ago, an American boy fell into a river, but 30 years later, he woke up in a rice paddy in China. Looking around, the boy seemed completely lost. He had no idea what was happening. He got up and wandered through the quiet rice fields until he reached a bustling market. That's when a kind stranger noticed him and asked why he was all alone and where his parents were. But before he could answer, his eyes rolled back and he passed out. With the help of the authorities, the boy was sent to an airport in America, and the task of finding his family fell to immigration agent Marty. He rushed to the airport right away and got the basic rundown from the investigators that this boy had mysteriously appeared in a rice paddy. On top of that, they'd found handwriting on the collar of his sweatshirt that read Jacob. They figured that was probably his name, but he had no ID, no passport, no departure records from the past year, and even the missing persons database had nothing matching his name or photo. It was like he'd appeared out of thin air. Nobody knew why he was there. He seemed severely traumatized. No matter what they asked, he wouldn't say a word. After hearing all this, a puzzled Marty went to meet the boy. He tried calling him Jacob to see if he'd respond. The boy turned his head slightly. So Jacob was indeed his name, but just like the investigator said, he wouldn't speak. No matter what Marty asked, the boy stayed silent. So to build some rapport and hopefully get some information out of him, Marty took him to a burger joint and got him burgers and fries, every kid's favorite. He even let him play games on his phone, and sure enough, it worked. The boy typed a few words on the phone and showed Marty.
Arcadia, Missouri? Is that where you're from?
When Jacob nodded to confirm, Marty immediately called the police in Arcadia, but they told him someone had already asked about this. There was no missing boy named Jacob in their records. Marty wanted to dig deeper, but they just hung up on him. Was Jacob lying? After leaving the burger place, Marty called a children's shelter, ready to drop Jacob off there, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. So while waiting for someone to pick up, he asked Jacob,
"You have a home or not? People will look after you?"
At that moment, the call connected. Marty picked up the phone, but after hesitating for a long moment, he hung up. He took a deep breath and asked Jacob,
"If I took you to Arcadia, could you show me the way to get to your house?"
With Jacob guiding the way, they drove to a small town in Arcadia and stopped in front of a house. The mailbox out front read Langston. Marty glanced over at Jacob, and the boy smiled and nodded. This was his home. Marty rang the doorbell, and a white-haired man in his 60s came to the door. His name was Henry Langston. Marty explained why he was there and asked a few questions. Henry confirmed that he did have a son named Jacob, but he passed away 32 years ago. Could this be a mistake? Marty apologized and turned to leave. Henry started heading back inside, but just then, he noticed Jacob standing right there. He greeted the boy, and Jacob asked him,
"Which way greeting goes a million miles per hour?"
"Frog in a blender."
Clearly, this was a little cue, a game the father and son used to play. Henry blurted out the answer instinctively, and his face went pale. Before he could even process what just happened, Jacob cried out "Dad," and ran over to him, throwing his arms around him. His wife Lucille heard the commotion and came outside to see who was there. When she saw Jacob, she froze, but unlike Henry, she recognized Jacob almost immediately. After that, Henry told Marty about the accident 30 years ago. That day, Jacob was playing by the river behind the hill. He accidentally fell in. His aunt happened to be passing by and heard him screaming for help. She tried to save him, but neither of them made it. It was a tragedy the family never recovered from. But could this boy really be Jacob? The same Jacob who died 32 years ago. The son they buried with their own hands in the family plot. Lucille could barely believe it. She wanted to reach out and touch him, but instinctively pulled her hand back. Then she knelt down and studied his face carefully, in complete disbelief. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. That's when Jacob said, "You look different." Those words snapped Lucille back to reality. With trembling hands, she reached out and touched his face. Now she could truly feel him. She believed it. This was her son. Was this really someone coming back from the dead? Outside, Marty was completely baffled. He called his boss and gave him a rough summary of the situation, saying he needed to stay and get to the bottom of this. As he was talking, he spotted a photograph through the window. He hung up immediately and snapped a picture of it. It was a photo from 32 years ago, and there in the photo was Jacob, looking exactly the same as the boy standing here today.
"Hey! What are you doing? I told you feds on the phone that you had the wrong kid. You just show up here and you start harassing my brother's family over what? Just be quiet first, Henry.
Listen to me.
I said I got this, Henry.
The man who showed up was the local sheriff, Henry's brother Fred. He pulled out a report and accused Marty of making things up, demanding to know why they were looking for a child who'd been dead for 32 years. When Fred saw Jacob standing right there in front of him, he reacted just like Henry had, speechless, frozen in place. At that moment, the toy slipped from Jacob's hand and he collapsed to the ground shaking. They rushed him to the hospital immediately. The doctor examining Jacob was Fred's daughter Maggie, Jacob's cousin. During the exam, she was shocked to find she couldn't hear Jacob's heartbeat, but when she looked down at the stethoscope, she realized she'd put it on backwards. She must have been that shaken up. She flipped it around and listened again. Everything was normal. Then Jacob started to speak.
"You look like my Aunt Barbara. Did you know her?" I tried to help her. I tried, but I slipped and I fell in."
You mean you fell in and she went in after you, right? Jacob, did somebody tell you this story?
He was there too.
He who?
He was holding her arm and...
So all along, Henry and the family assumed the aunt had tried to save Jacob, but that was just their assumption after the fact. The truth was, Jacob had been trying to save his aunt. But who was this man he mentioned? And judging by the questions Maggie was asking Jacob, she clearly didn't believe this boy was really Jacob. As someone with a medical education, she thought it was impossible. It just didn't make scientific sense. To get to the truth, Maggie collected samples from them and ordered a paternity test. Meanwhile, Jacob ran into someone at the hospital and said hello. The man introduced himself as the town's church pastor, Tom.
That's not your name.
It's not.
It's my best friend's name. We like to play there.
Hearing this, old memories flashed through Tom's mind. He remembered him. Then Jacob asked if everyone he knew was already dead. Tom didn't know how to answer. Just then, a nurse came over and greeted Tom, then led Jacob back to his room. Tom stood there, unable to move. Beyond the shock, he was filled with doubt. He had no idea how to deal with this person, or this situation. Later, after leaving the hospital, Tom told his wife about Jacob. He said he believed it really was Jacob, but he just couldn't accept it. For over a decade, he'd been teaching people to believe in God, to believe in miracles. But now, a miracle was standing right in front of him, and he was the one who couldn't believe. How was he supposed to preach after this?
You don't need to have all the answers. That's not your job. You just need to comfort those who have questions.
Meanwhile, Henry and Lucille stayed with Jacob at the hospital, while Marty and Maggie headed to the records room to look through the files from 32 years ago on the accidental deaths of Jacob and his aunt. But while everyone was consumed by this boy who'd come back from the dead, something else was happening. About 300 miles from town on a highway, a man in a hat flagged down a car. He said he was heading to Arcadia. His family was there. Another one just like Jacob was coming back. At the same time, Lucille and the others realized Jacob was gone. He'd climbed out through the bathroom window. After a frantic search, Henry and the police found him on the hill behind his house. He was digging around in a hollow tree and eventually pulled out a small package. Inside was a toy soldier, a gift Henry had given him years ago. It was his favorite toy. Back at home, Lucille made Jacob some food. For some reason, he had an enormous appetite, eating more than an adult. Lucille knew it wasn't normal, but she didn't care. She didn't want to overthink it. She just wanted her son by her side, but Henry felt differently. He didn't believe this was their son. He couldn't accept any of it.
I know you're having trouble accepting it. That boy is ours.
Our boy died 32 years ago.
After saying that, Henry stormed out of the house. Just then, Marty and Maggie arrived. They'd come to ask Jacob some questions and find out what really happened that day. Jacob began to tell his story. He said the river used to be a hunting ground for Native Americans, and he would often go there to look for arrowheads. That day, he went there like he always did. But on the way, he heard a baby crying. He followed the sound and found his baby cousin, Maggie, lying in a stroller. He looked around to see if anyone else was nearby and heard someone screaming for help. It was his aunt, Maggie's mother, clinging to a log in the raging current, barely hanging on. He scrambled onto a wooden post to try and reach her, but he slipped and fell into the water himself. He fought his way back to the surface and saw a man appear on the post above. The man was trying to grab his aunt, but the current was too strong. He couldn't hold on to her. She slipped away into the water, and Jacob sank under completely, hitting a rock and blacking out. The next thing he knew, he woke up in that rice paddy.
What do you remember after that?
Nothing.
About this guy. Had you seen him?
I think so. He's in a picture by the piano.
This man was obviously someone they knew. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been in the photo. After talking to Jacob, Marty found Henry sitting in the cemetery, staring at the family tomb. He told him what Jacob had said, and that the paternity test results were in. Jacob was his son, but Henry still wouldn't believe it, because he was the one who placed his son in that coffin, and buried him right here. His son was here. He couldn't accept this. He couldn't accept this person. The truth was, it wasn't that he couldn't accept the Jacob standing before him. It was that he couldn't let go of the Jacob he'd lost. That evening, Henry went to see Fred, and told him what Jacob had said, that there was a man there that day. Fred asked why the man would have been there. Henry stammered and said maybe they were having an affair. They'd been together for a while. They just hadn't gotten around to telling him before the accident happened. Meanwhile, Jacob had a nightmare. He dreamed he was in the cemetery and saw the man in the hat from before. The man crumbled into ashes right before his eyes. And then Jacob himself turned to ashes too. Was this some kind of omen? On the other side of town, Marty went to Maggie and asked for her help convincing Henry to let them open Jacob's coffin. He'd exhausted every other possibility and had come up empty. Sure, he could just file for a court order, but asking was a matter of respect. Maggie was torn. Her mother was buried there too, but she agreed. That same afternoon, she brought Marty to Henry to discuss opening the coffin. She wanted the truth just as badly, but Henry flat out refused, and he wasn't budging. Marty didn't give up. The next day, he went to the local courthouse to file for the necessary paperwork. But when he got there, he saw Fred chatting with the judge. Henry had told Fred about the exhumation plan the night before. Fred obviously didn't want it to happen either, so he'd already been to the judge. He'd gotten ahead of Marty. Marty figured as much. He let out a sigh and said,
Something tells me I'm not going to get that court order.
Oh, you mean the one to open my family's tomb? The tomb that my wife is in? No, you're not. Oh, and I made some calls. You're nothing but a desk jockey. A glorified chauffeur who shuttles immigrants from one airport to another, and you have been for years. So don't pretend to be something you're not.
News about Jacob kept spreading through town, and people were looking at him more and more strangely. To help Jacob and get people to treat him normally, Lucille went to Tom for help. She asked him to talk to Jacob because ever since the park incident, the boy wouldn't even leave the house. But Tom still hadn't sorted out his own feelings. He still didn't know what to make of Jacob. So he made an excuse about a meeting and politely declined. He started to walk away, but stopped after just a few steps. He told her he'd come by later. Elsewhere, whether she'd heard something or figured it out on her own, Maggie tracked down the man, the one who had tried to save her mother that day. She asked him one question.
Are you my father?
No. No. I just want to tell you, I didn't leave you. I waited by the river until someone found you.
After getting her answer, Maggie quietly left. The man went back inside and said to a mysterious figure in the room,
She found us.
No doubt about it. This had to be yet another person who'd come back from the dead. Who it was, we don't know yet, but I bet you've already figured it out. That evening, Marty still hadn't given up on the exhumation. He might not have been high-ranking, but he was still a federal agent. So over dinner at a restaurant, he called his superior, laid out the situation, and she agreed to help. She said he'd have the paperwork by tomorrow at the latest. And as luck would have it, Maggie was at the same restaurant, having drinks with her friend Elaine. She'd barely set her glass down. When Elaine's phone rang, it was her brother. She picked up and heard him screaming and cursing on the other end. He was ranting about seeing the devil. Something had clearly terrified him.
Everything okay?
It's Ray. He's talking crazy and he's got a gun.
If you can guess, it was the man from before. They rushed out to get there. Marty spotted Maggie and called out to her, asking what was going on. She quickly filled him in, and he jumped in the car with them. When they arrived at Elaine's place, they found her brother Ray armed and with his dog, screaming at a small wooden shed. He was completely unhinged.
I got you in there! Who's in there? Steven! I got him trapped inside the shed!
Calm down, Ray. Just
What?
down.
You don't believe me?
Put the gun down, Ray.
No,
Come
we
on,
believe
Steven!
you. Just,
Show yourself!
Just put the gun
Come
down.
on! Come out now!
As everyone called out for calm, the door of the shed slowly opened. The man in the hat stepped out, just as they'd suspected. He slowly took off his hat, and when everyone got a good look at his face, they were all stunned.